think, you know, performance and connection is not about showing somebody how talented you are or how gifted you are, what your rhythmic delivery can be like or anything like that. It's really about reaching out and grabbing somebody and hugging them and being together for this time that you're going to be sharing this story and inviting somebody in. All right, so what you see behind me back there, over there, is an old drive-in movie theater, which I think is the perfect place to tell this story because I'm talking about connections. And you know, I think it's pretty amazing that people would come out here in their cars and watch a movie. And so there's nothing better than watching film together and sitting close to people in a car, and also being in an environment with other cars where you're all experiencing the same thing. And film is all about connection, and theater and all kinds of art. So anyway, I want to talk about how different focal lengths of lenses can aid you in telling a story, can aid you spiritually and emotionally. Like, you know, some lenses are really, really wide and can evoke a different kind of feeling than lenses that are really, really close up. And so without trying to explain that technically, I'm just going to tell stories of my experiences of connection in my artwork, meaning theater and film, and maybe that can help to explain how I choose different lenses, because I've become completely obsessed with the notion of why you use a lens, when you use a lens, where you would use a lens, like, you know, why you choose different focal lengths, why you would use a zoom lens over a prime lens, and things like that. So anyway, let's get to this movie theater back here, and I'm going to show you different focal lengths and share a couple of different stories with you. So let's get to that. We're trying to come together, you know, we're trying to get through things, help one another, you know, guide one another. I mean, that's what I'm always looking for. Like when I see great art, it usually helps me or guides me. It inspires me to be able to do things that maybe I didn't think I could do, or maybe it made me feel a little bit less alone. I think one of the most important things when you're creating art, whether you're writing a play or writing a film, when you're in performance, when you're with people and you're trying to connect with people, is empathy. Empathy is everything. Like, who are these people? What have they been through? What are they going through now? What have they come through before? What is their resilience about? Like, who are these human beings that have come here to experience your story? And how are you going to connect with them? Because the thing is, no matter what you do, it can't just only be about you. And you can't be just like putting your talent on somebody else. You know, you have to have a shared experience. You know, you have to have an exchange. You have to have a conversation. And so you really have to have empathy and think about the feelings and the emotions and the place that other people are coming from, not just where you're coming from. And so empathy plays a huge role in connecting when it comes to art. You can be technically proficient. You know, you can have, in filmmaking, the greatest cameras. You can know how to use those cameras better than anybody. You know, you can be a veritable beast of a technician, of a cinematographer, but if you don't know how to connect with an audience, if you don't take people's hearts and souls into account. When I used to live in Washington Heights and I lived up on 157th Street, Riverside Drive, there was an area in the park in Riverside that was kind of like a circular fountain, or it used to be a fountain, but it was no longer working. And so it was kind of like a stage, you know, like an outdoor amphitheater. And so I used to rehearse there all the time. And slowly, people from across the street, there were like buildings across the street, they used to watch me. I used to see them come out of their building or look out the windows or whatever. And you know, at first I felt kind of weird about it, but then they started to come out and watch. And eventually, over like a few months of time, people started to bring lawn chairs out to watch me rehearse. And then we'd have like these impromptu kind of Q&As. And so I learned so much about my story from that, because when people come out to a situation like that, they're going to tell you the truth. And I'm asking them for feedback, and so I got a lot from that. Another time in Riverside Park, there were these two elders watching me, and they actually came up to me and asked me if they could watch. And I said, sure, you know, it'd be great. And so we had an incredible discussion afterwards. They sat there for 2.5 hours listening to me, and we did a Q&A, and it turned out that they were both theater directors. And so you can only imagine what I learned from that. I mean, it was incredible. And I really had only been working on the play for about 1.5 years at that time. So I was like, you know, like a sponge, just still kind of new in the process, because Broke Wide Open lasted for 6 years. Another incredible time was I was in McCarran Park in Brooklyn, and I was rehearsing. This one kid came over on a skateboard, kind of a young hipster guy, you know, skinny jeans, the whole thing. And so he started watching me and he goes, "Hold up, can you wait just for 1 sec? I want to get some friends." So I was like, okay. So anyway, I just kept rehearsing. I didn't think he was going to come back. And all of a sudden he goes into McCarran Pool where a bunch of kids were, like, I guess working on their skateboarding. And I'm telling you, like 40 kids came up, sat there and watched me rehearse for the next 2.5 hours. Again, we did a Q&A, and it was incredible, just remarkable. When you're on stage and you have people like pretty far away from you, especially if you're in a big house, like a Broadway house or an off-Broadway house, or, you know, if you have 20 or 30 feet between you and the audience, it's kind of easier to do your thing up there because you don't really physically feel the connection. And, you know, plenty of people still get nervous in a big house, but I mean, you know, for me, when you're performing in a small environment, it's a lot harder to bring the truth, because you have to kind of step out of the fact that you're performing or sharing a performance or a story that is for kind of commercial purposes. You know, you're asking people to come into a space and pay money to buy tickets to see you bring them some kind of, you know, experience. Really what you have to get to make it meaningful is to think more like they're coming to your house for dinner, you know, or you're meeting them in a restaurant to share a meal, or you're hanging out in the park, or you're on the train, or whatever. You know, you're just with them talking. So what I want to talk about is this friend of mine named Jane Rollins, who is no longer with us. She was an elderly woman, or I hate to say elderly woman because she was so incredibly full of life. And she was the mother of somebody who's incredibly close to me, my friend Francesca. And so Jane Rollins was like a legend on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I mean, a legendary soul, a true empath, a true soul, a heart, an incredibly beautiful spirit. And Francesca used to say that Jane Rollins, no matter where she was, if she saw somebody close by, she would conduct an interview with that person. In other words, if you were waiting for her next to the bus, if you were in line waiting to pay at Zabar's, you know, which is a delicatessen on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, people in New York City know. If you were at the airport waiting for your flight, if you just happened to be walking down the street and you were close to her, she was going to ask you about your whole life. Like, where are you from? What do you do? What do you love? What matters to you? Where are you headed? Do you have children? Why don't you have children? Why do you have children? The whole thing. Like, you know, I was at a bus stop with her once, and there was a young girl who was like a student sitting next to us. By the end of the time that we were waiting to the time that the bus showed up, Jane Rollins knew everything about this young girl from Pakistan who was going to Columbia University, who was studying biochemistry. I mean, she knew everything about her. So that is incredible connection. I guess another story about connection that's told well on this 55mm is I did a show, another one of my shows at the Camden Fringe Festival in London, and afterwards this man walked up to me and he was like, "Yo, your grandmother is just like my grandmother. They're exactly the same." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Yes, the same heart, the same soul, everything. Your family is my family." And I was like, "Really?" I said, "Where's your grandmother from? Where are you from?" He goes, "Nigeria." And I was like, "Your Nigerian grandmother is the same as my Jewish lady from the Bronx grandmother?" And he's like, "Exactly the same." And so I realized that this play that I had written, which was all about me, it was like a memoir piece about my life and my family and everything that I had been through, was no longer all about me. It was about all of us. It was about everybody. That I actually made a connection with somebody on a very, very deep, resonant level. At the end of the day, we're all kind of the same, right? We're human beings. We have relationships. We have hopes and dreams, and, you know, we have our faith and we have our lack of faith, and we have our doubts and our fears, and, you know, we're all pretty much the same. We all want the same things. You know, we want to be safe. We want to be fed. We want to be loved. We want to have love. We want to protect the people that we love. We want to, you know, have things. I mean, we're all pretty much the same. And so I want to tell a story about when I was headed to the Camden Fringe Festival in London. I flew into Heathrow Airport, and then I was on the train headed to the theater, to Camden. And so I had about an hour's trip to get there. And I'm on this train, I'm trying to figure out which stop to get off of to get to my hotel. And so there were two people on the train. with me. You know, it's late at night, it's about 11 o'clock when I first got on the train. And so one guy says to me, where are you headed? And I was like, I'm going to this hotel, blah, 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 in Camden. He goes, oh, wow, okay. Definitely don't get off at that stop. And I was like, why? And then this woman, she interrupts. She goes, no, 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 he can get off at that stop. Just don't get off at the next stop. And he's like, no, I'm telling you, it's that stop. And she's like, no, it's this stop. And they're going back and forth. And I'm like, yo, what's going on? Like, what difference does it make? So anyway, about 45 minutes go by and we're all talking. They never tell me actually why they're so concerned with this. And so anyway, they kind of come to the conclusion that I should get off at the first stop. So I get off at that stop. I take my bags, you know, I got my bag with the wheels on it, and I'm like being a tourist. And I go up the steps, and I get up the steps, and boom, the first thing I see is a woman get her face smashed with a bottle. And I'm like, whoa, and then I look around, and there's just like complete chaos, like craziness going on. You know, I see cars are burning, broken glass all over the place, stores are broken into, cops everywhere, people just running around. It was complete madness. And it's 11:45 at night, and I have no contact information for anybody. Like, I have contact information for the theater, but not for anybody's home. I don't know anybody there, so I'm just like, I gotta get to my hotel. It's 11:45. So anyway, I run over to a cop, and he's like, you can't get to that hotel, the street's closed. I'm like, what are you talking about? I have to get to the hotel. He goes, you can't go that way. And then all of a sudden I see all these other cops, and they have those, you know, those protective barriers that they use, those glass, kind of fiberglass looking things to keep people from being able to throw things at them. Because, you know, most times cops don't have guns in London. So anyway, these cops are running away from this crowd like crazy, okay? So anyway, he goes, good luck, but you can't go that way. And he just runs away. And I'm standing in the middle of this with my bag like tourist, you know, like I'm scared out of my brains. And so anyway, some young guy comes running over to me. He goes, where are you going? I said, I got to get to this hotel. He goes, follow me. And he turns around. He goes, let's go. And I'm like, okay. Either this guy is going to kill me and take all my shit, or he's going to save my life. So I took a leap of faith and we started going, you know. And so he took me about a block, or actually about 2 blocks parallel from this main road that was closed. And we started going through people's backyards. And I'm talking about, like, some people had fences. So I'm like throwing my bag over the fences, climbing the fence, getting my bag, running. Then we come to another fence, throw my bag, climb over the fence, get my bag, and we just keep going, we keep going. And I mean, it took us an hour to go, like, I think it was 18 blocks. I remember counting. And it took us about an hour to get there, and he goes, there's your hotel, good luck, and he just runs away. And you know, it was like one of those things where I never even got to say thank you, but he was just gone. And I mean, that guy saved my life. So anyway, I get to the hotel, the door's locked. And I see a woman sitting at the counter, and so I'm banging on the door, and she's like, closed. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I have a reservation. She's like, no. And so I'm like, I'm knocking. And then some guy comes around the corner, and he goes, closed. And I said, yo, okay. So I took one of those, there were one of those wooden horses, you know, those police horses that are like barriers or barricades. And I took the wooden top off of it, and I'm getting ready to break the window of this hotel because I'm definitely going to get in the hotel. And the guy comes running out, he opens the door like, no, what are you, crazy? And I was like, what, are you crazy? There's like riots going on. You know, I have a reservation. I can't even talk now, I'm so upset. So anyway, he lets me in, they check me in, I go up to my room, and I just like get in my room and wait. And I'm like, what have I just come to? You know, like, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. So anyway, to make a long story short, which maybe it's too late for that already, but anyway, the next day I find out that there's a curfew in effect, and so the first 3 nights of shows were canceled. So I'm like, I'm in London all the way from New York City, getting ready to do 2 weeks of shows, and I can't perform. It's truly an experience for the audience and for me. It's for us. It's not just for me. It's not me just putting my talent on you and saying, yo, look what I could do. That, you know, that's interesting for a couple of minutes, but after a while, it's got to be resonant. You know, there's got to be empathy. And so I spoke to the artistic director of the theater, and I said, can I at least get into the space to work? And she goes, somebody will be there in the late afternoon. Go by, he'll give you the keys, and you can work. But you can't obviously do the show. So I'm like, okay, cool. I just want to get in the space. So I get there, there's a man there, he gives me the keys. He said, please just lock up when you're done and just be careful. And I said, okay. And so he leaves. And, you know, I just started walking around, I'm looking around. And then I remembered I forgot to lock the door. So when I turn around and I come back, and as I get to the door, boom, some guy walks in and he's like, oh my God, you're Rock Wilk. And I'm like, yeah, I'm Rock Wilk. And he goes, please just perform the show. Like, I need you to perform the show. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, I didn't know there was a curfew. I walked all the way over here from my hotel. I just moved here from Japan. Sorry, it's really cold and my mouth is hard for me to move right now. He goes, I just got here from Japan. I just got a new job. My family's not going to be here for like 3 weeks. I came. Can you please just do the show? And I was like, yo, there's no stage manager. I got no lights. He goes, it doesn't matter. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And so no lights, you know, no production value at all, no set, no nothing. I'm just me and my body. I said, look, I'm not going to make believe there's a big audience. It's just me and you. Just please sit here at the end of the stage. So I put a chair up on the stage. And I said, I'm going to do the whole show for you, and I'm going to do it with everything that I have. And he goes, okay. And I said, okay. So I start performing the show. And I'm telling you, I gave this guy everything, like every inch of my soul. I gave it to him. And this guy was the greatest audience in the history of the world. He was incredible. This guy laughed, he cried, he screamed, he was kicking his feet, he was throwing his arms. I mean, he was incredible. It was one of the greatest performance experiences I've ever had. Connection is so important when it comes to performance. There is no performance without connection, without empathy, without considering who is receiving your story. Like, you have no idea who's in that audience. You have no idea who this person is and what experiences they've had and what they've been through in their life, you know, what they've gotten through, what they have, the type of resilience that they've had to get to this moment where you are dealing with another human being. Now, whether it's 3,500 people in the audience or one person, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. When I do a play, it's generally over 2 hours long. I have to memorize 2 hours of work, and I'm a solo artist, and so I don't have anybody else on stage with me, and so I'm memorizing 2 hours, 2.5 hours of words, which is incredibly difficult, but just, you know, you do a lot of hard work, you dedicate yourself, you commit yourself to it, you just do the work and you got it. But the thing is, just because you have it memorized doesn't mean that it's going to be good. It doesn't mean it's going to communicate. It doesn't mean it's going to connect. It doesn't mean anything. It's like, why are you saying these words? Do you need to say these words? What is the point? You know, are you absolutely compelled? Do you need to tell this story? Like, that's what it's all about. When you perform for me, when you tell me a story, when you make a film, when you get on stage and do a play, when you're on television, when you're in the movies, when you paint for me, I want to know, I want to feel like the truth is emanating from that work. I want to be touched by it. I want to be moved by it. And when I present my work, when I make this offering to people, I want them to feel like I am giving them my heart. My whole point about this whole thing is, when I teach my workshops, I teach performance is all about connection. It's all about empathy. It's all about consideration of your audience, of the people who are receiving your work. Who are these people? Where are they coming from? What have they been through? What are they going through right now? Where are they headed? Like, what is their life like? What is my life like in relation to them? We're all connected, right? We're all connected. Everything you do affects me, and everything I do affects you. And that's how I feel about lenses, you know? It's like every lens has a different look to it. It has a different feel to it. And so when you're making a film, you really have to consider what lens to use for how you're trying to express yourself and what you're trying to express. I mean, obviously, if it's something very intimate, then you're going to use a closer lens and try to get closer to the camera. But if you're, you know, doing something where you want to include the environment and show somebody where you are and tell a story, maybe you're walking around, or maybe people are running or doing things or whatever, you want to have a wider perspective. And if you want things to just look normal, like real life, then you want to use a lens that does not distort anything, like a 35mm or a 24mm. But if you want to maybe add some, you know, levity to it, or some grotesqueness to it, or whatever, some weirdness, then you might want to use an ultra-wide lens that distorts people's faces, like in the Grand Budapest Hotel, where they kind of distorted everything, and they have that kind of fisheye look all the time, where, you know, everything just looks kind of surreal and just not like real life. They're bringing you into a special world that they have created that is not just the regular world, as opposed to The Godfather, a story like that, which is just the real world, you know? And so I love the thought of lenses and looking at the world through other people's eyes or through a different perspective. It gives you an opportunity to see things differently, to feel things differently, to say things differently, to express your heart, to receive things. You know, it's a great opportunity to be creative. It's like being able to speak different languages. It's just being able to have more tools in your toolkit to express yourself. And so anyway, I hope this makes some kind of sense to you, and I hope it helps in a way. If you're on a lens journey like I am, I still have so much to learn. I think we all have things to learn forever. That's all I want to talk about today. Thank you so much for watching as usual. If you're into the kind of work that I do, please consider subscribing to my channel. And it'd be awesome if you smash that like button. And just do you. Be honest, be real, be open, be free, be love. See you on the next one. You know, Jack Rollins, who was the husband of Jane Rollins, used to say to me, Rock, the great artists are the ones who open up their window and allow people in to see what's inside of them, to open up the window of their soul, to really get to know them, to like really share who they are, like genuinely in real life,